It takes time. Remember, we're a bunch of pioneers that are working to make progress. It takes patience and time and years to finally get there to where we will eventually be stronger and stronger. And the VIA, that whole concept, is something we're still working on. We're basically underwater swimming and discovering various treasures of seashells and many other hidden treasures. So I'm Paul Johnston. Some call me PJ, some sign it Paul, but I like the sign name Paul. Truthfully, how did I get involved with deaf art? Well, it was as a first year student at RIT when I met Chuck Baird. He and I became fast friends, and of course, he used to be a student under Betty G. Miller, teacher at Gallaudet, who eventually transferred to RIT. And one day, we went to a painting studio, and I remember seeing something, and my jaw hit the floor. I saw a painting that was called The Mechanical Ear. And it really blew my mind. I never thought that you could really express the deaf experience. Having grown up, we were brainwashed that we have to learn how to paint and draw and create and follow the standard subject matter, the portrait, the shape, the figure, the flowers, the animals, the same old, same old. But we never really got to focus on the deaf world, the deaf community, how you grew up in a residential deaf school. And the problem is, growing up, we never had that opportunity to really sit down and discuss about the deaf experience. It's like the Valley of Clarification, grow up in a deaf school. We really didn't have that. And then when I finally went to NTID, I took several different classes from several different teachers, Lloyd Grady and Bob Panera. And Bob Panera was my absolute favorite teacher. He's kind of like my second father. And really, I became very close to him. He explained the history and the philosophy of literature and all about the deaf characters and the characters of a story. And I really began to understand who I was as a deaf individual. And then I met Chuck Baird, and we continued the discussion and became a rich experience where I was fascinated with collecting various works of art by various artists. And then I was a little bit self-taught. I did some personal research, and back then we didn't have an introduction to deaf art course or anything of that nature. I know one course, it was Introduction to Deaf Literature, Deaf Studies, and Bob had taught that, and he mentioned about, you had different general artists. And I kept asking and posing various questions. And Bob finally got tired of me asking questions and raising my hand. He said, well, why don't you start something and just pioneer some additional research? That had a profound impact on me. Now, Chuck Baird's work on the mechanical ear really, gave me an epiphany. I mean, it was critical of the method of teaching in the residential school of the oral method. And then my junior year, I took a painting class as an elective, and I did what was called eyescape, a painting about a large eye and the inner workings of the eye and how it is viewed from a deaf person's perspective. And of course, I was painting this out. I was trying to figure out. He did the ear. I wanted to do the visual component of the eye and how it memorizes things and how it processes and how it, cries and how it collects various colors, such as a regular camera lens. And I put it all together, what it may look like. And of course, back then I wasn't a very good painter, but I majored in design of woodwork and so forth. And they had their requirements of you had to have functional design, how to make a bed and a chair and so forth. And that didn't really have anything related to deaf issues. And I was kind of, disappointed by that. And then my senior year, we had to do a senior thesis. And so I was asked, what did I want to do in terms of my senior thesis project? So I gave it some thought. So I thought I wanted to do some type of sculpture or some type of work or furniture. And I wanted to do something, make it out of, the shape of a hand, something to do with the hand and the fingers. And so I was able to experiment. And that's how I created the woodwork of the hand. And it was really the pride of hand. Oh, and then there was one. I took a sculpture class at Penn State University, and it was about instruments and finding objects, and I would drive and just pick up this huge, large, tree trunk, and then I would look for some rope from a vessel, from a ship, and then I would find the grill from the front of a car, from the front of the hood, and get something that you would fill up water in a container and put it all together. And my art professor, when he saw it, he looked at it and said, "What in the world is that?" I see there's a tree trunk, there's a rope connected to it, and you've got this grill. I said, you know what? That's an example of my hearing aid. And they all looked at that. They were disgusted. I said, yeah, it hurts. It's big. It's bulky. It's in my ear. You've got the mold. You've got the tree trunk that represents the mold. It's very similar. It's symbolic. You've got the long rope from the shipping vessel. It's like the wires in my ear. It's uncomfortable. And then, of course, you've got the grill that's just like the old hearing aids that you'd wear on the box in the front of your chest. And all the hearing graduate students, they were overwhelmed. So I remember going to that deaf artist conference. It was the first year of the conference, and we thought, well, what was this going to look like? Well, it was, the best way I could describe it, it was just a flood of deaf artists. You meet two or three or four over here, but this one was where we had over 100 deaf artists come together. And it was unbelievable to see everyone there. It was so nice. I mean, we didn't all have the same philosophies. You had Republicans and Democrats, and you had people that were at odds in terms of politically. And I don't blame them. There's nothing new. There's the struggle to finding one's identity or their culture, or they have discovered it or they haven't. One particular night we were talking about deaf art and what exactly is it, and movement and Devia. And we probably had 100 participants in the classroom. It was a huge circle of individuals, and it was really impossible to get through every single person to get their take on it. It just took, and some people were so far away I couldn't see them. And I'm disappointed we didn't have any video footage. And for them to come together one year and then not come again, it didn't work. We had to meet on a regular basis. Betty Miller and Nancy Crichton, they had the idea about the manifesto, and it was from some other artist, you know, that they had a similar concept. They were able to bring this in, and really, it was kind of like a way to announce and put up the flag and plant the flag and say, this is, we've made our mark. And so this manifesto was written. Now you got to remember, this was done in 4 days. We condensed all of this work from the initial discussions, brainstorming, to revising the manifesto, and then finally coming up with a tremendous artwork and painting. We did this in 4 days. I can't believe we did that, but we really tried our best. I mean, we didn't want this to be a flop after 4 days. We wanted to really emphasize that. Look, we're not setting up some rules or laws. This is just something that is a seed that is to be planted, and hopefully it'll take root and something will come from it. And so we were not trying to prohibit certain things. We wanted this to be wide open. It could be written, it could be poetry. You could have your depth in that. You could find the meaning in that particular artwork, or you could find something visual. And we did not want a set of rules. I mean, this was just something that was new, pioneering. And so it would lead to, okay, what's the deaf experience, or what's deafhood, or what is this, or what is that? And so that was what we were struggling through. Of course, we weren't finished with the work. We were so new at this, but it was okay. People would say, well, what is, the VIA? Well, this is the basic concept. It's work related to deaf issues, the deaf experience, the solutions, the needs in the deaf community. It's wide open. And really, we had Clayton Valley. The two of us had discussed the concept of Devia, and he wanted to borrow and use Devia in his his work of poetry in his classroom. But and we thought, yeah, yeah, well, sure, you're welcome to that. You're welcome to that. And as we talked about, he was frustrated because he was all alone. I think it was 87, 89, 90, somewhere right around there, when he was a professor here at Gallaudet, professor of linguistics, and we were talking about this, and I remember he felt very isolated. There was a lot of pessimism about his artwork and his poetry, and I hate to bring this up, but it really was the crab theory in effect. I mean, a lot of people were not accepting of De Villa at that point in time. And really, when I talked to Betty Miller about this, I remember, she was laughing because, she was saying that back in 1972, there were a lot of deaf professors that were saying, hey, 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 don't show that here. Let's keep that a secret. Keep it under wraps. There was that characteristic of Uncle Tom, right? It was that let's be submissive, let's bow down to the upper echelon, the hearing elites. Whatever you do at home or kitchen, you can talk and complain and vent all you want. And in public, oh, everything's fine. Just go along with the flow and just be submissive in that regard. Well, look, at that time, I really applaud, Betty Miller really bringing this to the forefront and exposing it. It's no different from anything else of other cultures or people writing and complaining, whether that be about Shakespeare, the French Revolution, or about China and World War II and all the negativity about that. Well, I mean, here we are. We're seeing the negativity about this. There's no difference. We didn't want to have any prohibited issues within the deaf community. We don't. Hey, let's keep it a secret. Let's not share it. Let's keep it under wraps. No, as we sat down with Clayton Valley and we were talking about, hey, we need to recognize ASL poetry and his work. How do we recognize De Villa and so forth? So we noticed there were some silos. We needed to bring it together and merge everything, make it stronger, and build upon one another's work. We noticed that he had the poetry, I had the painting, and I could express through the painting and the artwork, and we could work hand in hand with the theatrical and just kind of build a tapestry and build upon one another and merge everything in terms of the concepts that we were working on. And then, of course, his was pulled away. He was gone. So to pick one, it was the deaf education of pinballs, and really, and actually before that, Lynn Jacobowitz. Both of us worked together on a play. It was a famous ASL poetry, uh, and it was about profession of a performer. And we performed at Deaf Way One, and I remember that I basically performed what a pinball looked like, and bouncing back and forth and bouncing up and down through the pinball machine, and that really led to a greater understanding of the pinball, led to making that artwork, and it really started from a performance, and it morphed into an actual piece of art. So again, from what I saw as a deaf person, from my perspective, my friends and my parents and others, they're constantly placing me in different scenarios. I mean, we didn't know if we'd ever arrived at this place or if we ended up somewhere else. It felt like we were a pinball bouncing back and forth. We never knew. I mean, the hearing children would grow up knowing that they have to go this straight path. They go to a public school. There's a standard curriculum to follow. You learn how to read and write. You learn how to speak proper English. Then you go to college or university. You get a job. That's it. Well, for us, many of our parents had a hard time making a decision. Is it the oral method? Is it the manual signing method? You have the doctor's influence. You have the peer pressure, and you've got the deaf attitudes, big D, and the lowercase d deaf attitude. All of that as a mixed bag. And then you've got the pathological medical view, and you've got the cultural view, and you've got a lot of these different barriers. Some fail, because they were, frustrated with either reading and writing. Some were frustrated because they didn't get support from vocational rehabilitation or the 504 law or PL 195 and many other symbols that are out there. So we incorporated that. I mean, you constantly you run into someone or you miss the opportunity to meet someone. That's how we looked at how we're sort of controlled by the hearing people, if you will, and how they controlled us. there's a lot to tell stories. I mean, you could write a book just on this one piece, really. I mean, what I was trying to accomplish was to create variety in terms of various themes. You've got the politics, you've got satire, you've got optimism, you've got something that's abstract, and of course, I want to be able to teach students in a much better manner. You've got the political again with the pinball, and you've got the hands, and then you got something that's positive. Then I decided to do a piece of work on the poetic hand. Again, it's based off the fact that was really involved and immersed with teaching sign language and creative sign and the beauty of sign language. And of course, people would say, "Oh, deaf people can't hear sound. They can't hear the beauty of music." And I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. How can I educate them that we don't need sound? We can enjoy the visual, just like you've got that music of the ear. We've got the music of the eye." And so I wanted to be optimistic and preserve our sign language. There's a lot of attitudes. Let's not focus on ASL. That's too embarrassing. ASL is broken English. It's a lower substandard English. It's ghetto slum type of English. Phooey on that. Listen, you know what? We could use ASL, translate, play with the language, and with other colleagues, we would do the same thing. That led to the creation of that artwork of the poetic hand. And it's after many, many years of teaching, visual gestures and teaching sign language classes and performing artists and so forth. Before I actually loved, the mask. A part of me really loves the theatrical side as well as the artwork side. But I used to direct a particular play and was able to study the use of the masquerades. And I love traveling around the world and going to different countries, such as France. Again, they use the masquerade, and of course, I would study mythology, the spirits, and those cultures that cherish the spirits, and the Indian culture, or in the country or the continent of Africa, and of course, they would utilize mask. And really, I hope to see Devia and deaf theater and ASL poetry and deaf literature all really morph into one and create a new media, a new concept or idea. I would love to see that take place in the future.